Good morning. I'm very excited to be here as part of the Cartoon Crossroads Columbus Festival with our very special guest, Barbara Brandon-Croft. Very quick little details from Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. Land acknowledgement. Cartoon Crossroads Columbus acknowledges that the ancient ancestors of the eastern woodland tribes, now referred to as the Dina and Hopewell cultures, inhabited the land we know as Ohio. Their descendants, including the living nations of the Shawnee, Miami, Wyandot, Delaware, and Seneca Cayuga, we honor and respect the diverse indigenous peoples connected to this place where we gather. Sponsors, thanks to the sponsors, including Greater Columbus Arts Council, Ohio Arts Council, White Castle, and UBS. And the plan for this morning, I wish we had much more time, but for our short time together, I'm going to introduce our very special, illustrious guest, Barbara Brandon-Croft. I'm Susan Kirtley. I am a professor at Portland State University and the director of our Comic Studies program, and I'm very honored to be here as part of this conversation. So I'm going to do a little introduction. I have some questions, and then we'll open it up to questions for all of you, and I've been told that we have to be prompt because there's so many exciting events happening today. So, Barbara Brandon-Croft is the first Black woman cartoonist to be nationally syndicated in the mainstream press. Her comic strip, Where I'm Coming From, began its historic run in the Detroit Free Press in 1989 and was nationally syndicated 2 years later. And if I make many mistakes, you just correct me.
Yeah, you got it.
Making her the 8th Black nationally syndicated comic artist, and her father was the 3rd. The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund argues that Brandon-Croft's incredible impact with her all-Black women strip unfortunately does not get nearly the recognition she deserves. The strip was anthologized in 2 collections, Where I'm Coming From and Where I'm Still Coming From, and in exciting news, will be coming out in this beautiful edition in February. So you can order it now.
Yeah, you can pre-order.
Please order it now.
Yeah.
As someone who studies her work, I'm so excited because I was telling her earlier that I was like going through old newspaper archives trying to find these old strips day by day by day, and it's just a joy that this is coming out. So thank you. I'm so excited. So Brandon-Croft, I have a quote from you. You explained to Dave Astor that this was when the strip was coming to an end, although it has lived on in different forms. It's incredible that for the past 14 years or more, including my time at the Detroit Free Press, I've been able to provide a running social commentary on what it's like to be a Black woman in America. Years from now, I hope it offers some historical value. I would argue that having immersed myself in this comic strip, that it absolutely offers historical insights as well as laughs, witty commentary, and as I was reading it, it reminded me of a quote from one of my favorite authors, Audre Lorde. And she has this quote. She says, "As women, we have been taught either to ignore our differences or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. Without community, there is no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. But community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist." And I love this strip and this work because it acknowledges differences. It has these different characters, different points of view, but it also works to build community. So I'm just so honored to be here with you today. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Excellent. I thought perhaps we could start with a little bit about the origins of the strip, as well as some of your early influences, including
my dad.
Your dad. Oh. Also, I'm getting away from the microphone. Also, a good time to mention that people should go see your work and his work at the Billy Ireland as part of the exhibit Still.
Yes.
And it's this amazing exhibit at the Billy Ireland.
Currently
through December?
Through October 23rd, so run over there next.
October 23rd, you go now. Now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see your work in conversation with your father. And if you aren't familiar with him, the creator of Luther, which ran from 1968 to 1986. And as I understand it, you assisted your father with his strip, and he really encouraged you to start. Wasn't it something like a dare is what I read?
Oh,
so can you talk a little bit about the origins of your strip and how your father influenced you?
So my dad, Brumsic Brandon Jr., it's a weird name, so I have to say it out loud. So people are like, how do you say that? Brumsic Brandon Jr. He was a cartoonist, and he started cartooning when he was a kid, and didn't stop until he couldn't draw anymore. But before Luther he was very proud to be nationally syndicated. He said that was one of his greatest honors in life, to be nationally syndicated. So that was Luther, and the Billy Ireland has a boatload of original Luthers that you can go see. And it was it was kids, third graders, living in the ghetto. He called it the inner city, but I'm older. And he, okay, that was Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to talk fast.
Oh, no. Just
Calm
for that.
down. Okay, so when he was doing Luther, it was a daily. I did a weekly, so every other week I did 2. Really heavy burden. But my dad did a daily, which is a whole nother ball of wax. And and he put Zipatone at the time on his strips, which is tedious. If you know, I ended up using Letratone because the Zipatone was no longer there 30 years later. But I had no idea I was being trained to be a cartoonist. I had no idea. I didn't even know I was going to be a cartoonist. But when I was, I guess, in junior high school, he gave me and my siblings, maybe not you, Linda, but he gave me and my brother at least a test to see who had a steadier hand to help him do the Zipatone, and I won. And we kept my brother's shaky drawing up on the wall for a long time because it was funny. But so that's what I did. So every other week I was putting on Zipatone, and I was paid. So I was a professional back then, junior high school or high school. And I went to school for art. I didn't know what I was going to do. Had no idea I was going to be a cartoonist, none of that. And then when I got out of school, well, when I left school, let's be clear. When I left school, I had a job. I got a job at a fashion place, and I took my portfolio. They needed an illustrator, and they said they would take somebody who doesn't know anything. I was like, that's me. I got a job as a reporter, a fashion reporter, and an illustrator for them. And then there was a magazine, a Black women's magazine that opened, and I was like, maybe I can get a job there. And I think my sister had a friend who had a friend. It was one of those kind of connections. And I went and had an interview with her. And she said, well, you have a sense of humor and you draw. Do you think you can come up with a comic strip? And that's when I was like, bing. It's like, yes, I can. I had seen it done. I had worked on comics. I knew what I was doing, kind of. And I said I could. And I came up with this thing. And talking heads, Black women talking heads. So in answer to your question, I knew what I was creating. I mean, who the audience was going to be, who I was creating for. So, and then the magazine folded before they liked it. And they said, do more. And I called in to bring in more. And they're like, we folded. I was like, what? That was very sad. And then I took it to Essence magazine, the only other Black magazine that I knew of, Black women's magazine. And they said they liked it, but they didn't want to put a comic in there. What was I doing since I wasn't making it as a cartoonist? I was like, I'm writing fashion. I got a job as a fashion beauty writer. Stayed there 6 years. My dad gets a letter from Marty Claus, who was the managing editor of Detroit Free Press, and she said, we want to I want our pages to reflect our community. Do you know of any Black cartoonists? So here comes the dare. So that's when I said to him, and my dad said to me, are you going to talk about being a cartoonist, or are you going to be a cartoonist? And I was like, I'm going to be one, And he was like, are you presentation ready? I said, yes, I am. What does that mean? I'm like, but what I had was these comic strips that I'd sent originally to Elon, that I prepared for Elon and sent to Essence. I sent this very same ones to Detroit, and they liked it. And shortly after, months after, they put me on there. So every Sunday in Detroit Free Press, you could see where I'm coming from. And that's how that happened. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to get where I'm coming from syndicated because I had a clue of how syndicates work. Because I seen my dad did. I put together a press kit of my work and sent it to the syndicates. And I got rejected from all except Universal Press Syndicate, who said, this is kind of interesting. And I was like, thanks. And they gave me a development deal. And 2 years later, I got syndicated, but it was cool. That's how it happened. It's all in this book.
I was just looking through the book and I noticed that I love that you have some of the letters and the correspondence behind the scenes. That's really exciting to get to see the story behind.
Yes, it's like an origin book, which is kind of cool.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I love those documents. So it's cool.
I sent them my rejection letters too. I was like, you want to put that in there? I thought it was kind of funny because I got rejected from my dad's syndicate. I was like, so I thought that's not in there.
Well, but, I think it's good for people when you know that it wasn't instant, that you worked for, that there was a lot of rejection involved, and that this was a process that you worked to it. So I love that all of those letters and those background details.
Yes.
This is an example of the strip, and I think I think it kind of shows the hallmarks of what you're going to see. The faces.
Yes.
Don't have traditional sort of paneling and things like that.
Right.
And I think it was also interesting in that it appeared on the editorial or opinion pages.
Yes, most often,
Most often.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the context of where it was placed in the newspaper and how that sort of influenced what you wrote about, as well as how you came to decide on this particular structure.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So initially I was coming up with it as an idea for a magazine. So that was what I had in my head. And I really loved Jules Pfeiffer, and I liked his space, and I liked the idea of speaking directly to the reader. I liked all that. I was like, so I kind of used those kinds of things. So I forgot the rest of the question.
I was talking about structure and how it was placed on the editorial pages.
Yes. Sorry.
It was a long question.
But it's interesting because the syndicate was like, if you did a daily, we could get more papers. If you did a daily, it would just fit in the comic page. And it would be that, you had a certain space requirements. It's like, if you did that, you could get more papers. I was like, I kind of like what I'm doing. It felt comfortable. I liked what I was doing. So newspapers had their choice of where to put it. And Detroit Free Press had it in their, I forgot the name of the section, but it was like their weekend leisure kind of section. Some people put it in their women's section. Some people put it in the editorial page section, which I found flattering. But I did catch it in the classifieds in a paper. I was like, what? I mean, that was only, real estate on a newspaper is hard to come by. And this was kind of big. So it had to go wherever they thought it could fit. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I really enjoy about the strip is that it invites the reader into a conversation with these figures. It's that, that point of view. It's like a conversation back and forth.
That was intentional. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And when they talk to each other, Yes. But when they talk to each other, I was trying to make it feel intimate, like you were eavesdropping on these ladies talking, and that you could hear what they were saying and get to know them better. So.
Right, and here we have a conversation, and I like this one when we have these different conversations, and you had this rotating cast of regular characters.
Yes.
And they were the girls, short for girlfriends, because they're definitely
they're adults. Yeah.
They're adults. And they're I included this one. I think this strip is so important and significant. It's also funny, and
thank you.
It's just fun and funny, and there's these wonderful moments where you get to have these eavesdrop on these intimate conversations. Yeah. And I just love these characters. How did they come into being, these distinctly different women?
Well, I have a bunch of friends, a bunch of close friends. My closest friend is here that I've known since I was 3. So, we're all, we've been, but so all of my friends kind of play a part as well as myself, so it's part of the the relationship between women. You know, a lot of times relationships between women are categorized as, oh, they're so catty, or they're just, you know, this. I'm like, we can be catty, but we still love each other. You know, it's like we still, you know, we can tease each other. We can be you know, crazy about, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like,
Exasperated, maybe?
yes, that's the word. I was like, why was a bee coming in? But anyway, yeah, you can, you know, your friends can do stuff and you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. But it's not like they're not your friends, you know. So it was just a way to show relationships between women. Yeah.
And you particularly focused on the hands
Yeah.
and the faces.
Yeah. And initially I just had heads. They were just floating heads. But it was easier to accentuate their thoughts or their moods or everything if I use hands. And I talk with my hands a lot, as you can tell. And so it was just natural to use hands to further what they're saying. Yeah.
And so this is an example I thought of one of the kind of fun, intimate, friendly conversations. You also took on a lot of political issues. And so I included some examples. This is, I think, this one's a little bit more recent. This is another one.
Yeah, they look better as this time went on.
Well, it's fun to see the evolution, though, you know, from that one from 1989. And we have this one, you know, this one. And then we have another example. I found this one particularly interesting.
Yes.
About this division within,
Yeah.
you know, this juxtaposition.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I only showed women in my comic strip. And so the different handwriting, I mean, the different lettering, she's talking to a guy. And so that's why I was trying to distinguish, make a difference. But, you know, what this is about is the pull between racism and sexism. And it's, if you're for one, you're not for the other, or, you know, all that kind of nutty stuff, and no acknowledgement of interconnections and intersections and, you know, intersectionality. And, you know, so that's what that represented, this particular strip. 1991, yes. Yeah.
Well, and it was interesting for me to read it because I read a lot about, you know, divisions within the feminist movement and all of these different lack of intersectionality and not understanding the intersections. And then I read this strip and I was like, you know, we can write books and books about it. And then we have this strip and it's like, well, yes.
Yes, this is what we're saying.
Concisely, this is exactly
what the issue is.
What the issue is.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate the facial expression at the end, you know, like.
Just like, what?
What? Yeah, exactly. Like, that's all we need is that, like, what face? Yeah, exactly. And then also dealing with these ideas of beauty myths and these sort of racialized.
Yeah. So this character is Monica, and she's very fair. She's got light eyes. She's got long wavy hair, and this is the good hair one. Yeah. So you know, people will tease me about my hair because I mean, if I let it, it's curly, but if I use the curling iron, it comes out. You know, so it's like, oh, you got that watch of my hair. You got that good hair. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, it's like, do you know how I got this hair? I was like, and this character I used to talk about those kinds of things. It's, you know, I came here like this, but it took the history of my people to get to that, you know. And so if it took my ancestors, slave masters, raping my great-great-great-grandmother for it to come down, for it to be in my genes, for my hair to look like this, why do we call this good hair? You know, that's what she talks about. Things like that. Things like about being light or thinking that this is beauty. And but she's one of the more blacker characters. She's more of a militant than some of the other characters. And that's fun to play with her ambiguous features, racially ambiguous features, and be able to talk about race in the way she talks about it. Yeah.
And I know that you got some pushback from different strips, and I found some of those different letters.
Oh.
to the editor of people who were unhappy. Did you know about these? Did
Oh,
you?
yeah. I had a file of them.
Did you?
I had a file of fan letters, which was very nice, and then I had a file of not so fan letters. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to read all, but this one, I mean, somebody was very upset, saying, why is she letting off her own personal esteem at the expense of further separating the races and it just feels so icky. I just feel so icky reading that.
Yeah,
but just going on and on about it. And then there's another one about segregation, where this woman, Mrs. Gary Crow, wrote a letter about this one. Oh, it's so awful. But just talking about, says now that segregation is illegal and not being taught, and is fought via equal opportunity, Barbara Brandon uses the subject as her cartoon theme. This portrays the narrow-mindedness and negativism that keeps a person from succeeding, and on and on.
Yeah, yeah. But very often people would not even read it, but they'd see all Black characters, all women, and I'd get, she's anti-men, she's anti-white. And I was like, good Lord, do you read it? And then they read it and they're still confused. I'm like, there's no hope. No, there's hope. There's hope. There's hope. But what you want to do is educate, and that's part of what I hope the Still exhibit does. I know that's what it does. It talks about racism through, I'm just going to throw that in there. But the Still exhibit that you can still see now, but it talks about those kind of things. My dad would do strips in 1966, and I could do a strip, and I'd find a strip of mine from 1990 something or 2000 something, and it's the same thing. So it's like all these themes don't go away. I mean, all you can do is hope to educate, and that's what this exhibit is trying to do, and hope to educate. And it's not trying to make anybody feel bad. It's just trying to educate. That's how you move on and then get yourself enlightened.
Yeah, and again, the exhibit, it has your work, it has your father's work,
yes.
It has this wonderful conversation. And I gave you the example when I met you the other day. I was saying that I was sharing one of your books with my daughter who's 13, and she was saying, "Oh, this is really good, Mom." And I was like, "Yeah." But she said, "But it really, I mean, these were from 1992," and my daughter was saying, "They could be written today. They're still just as relevant, and they're talking about these things in classrooms and schools."
Yeah, that makes me feel good, and I sound like a Van White. But when we were putting together this book, they wanted me to go through all 14 years of being in the syndicate, and so I was a little afraid to go through all that because, old stuff. You're like, did I do that? It's kind of embarrassing, But as I was, and there were some. I'm not saying there weren't any that were bad, but there were. And we edited those out as best we could. But I found myself kind of chuckling at my own stuff because a lot of the stuff I still feel the same way, or it still felt relevant. Uh-huh. So it's a really good book. but that's it's great to hear that your 13-year-old liked it. And so that's part of that. It's a universal messages in it that even if it is all Black women, it's like it's universal, and it's really great to hear that. Yeah.
Right. And it is, again, you talked about historical significance. It's so significant. It's so relevant. Sometimes I wish it wasn't as right. Not sometimes. I always like, it's like, oh, yeah, I wish that we weren't still struggling. But that's the whole name of the exhibit. Still, it's still going on. It's still relevant. It's still important to talk about these things.
Yes.
So I've got so many things to talk about. This is another one.
I kind of like that too.
That's another great example. I don't know.
So this is Lakeisha, and she was the most social conscious one. So she pops up a lot in the Still exhibit, but it's and this is like this could be today. The stock markets keeps crashing. The unscrupulous CEOs. Flat out fraud, all these things. And it's like we're the sociologists now explaining the phenomenon of white on white crime. I mean, come on, we get all the, it's Black on Black crime. What is that? What is wrong with them? It's like, what do you think this is? It's like, so that's where I was coming from.
It's such a great title, right?
It worked for me in my head. Yeah.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
about where these, where the characters are coming from, where it's coming from. It's coming from the newspaper. It's coming from this position in the newspaper where it gets to speak to this really wide audience,
Yes.
which I think is
Yes.
so fantastic. This one's more recent.
Yes. And this is the first one I did. This is the first time I started doing the strip again. And I was at work and it became clear. Remember how we didn't know who was going to win the presidency? And it was like, I don't know if it was finalized when I was at work. And so, as a cartoonist, you have to have other jobs. And I used to be a fact checker at Parents Magazine, and I was the research director there until they folded, which was February. I mean, that was great to have health insurance and all that. So anyway, working on it now. But I had to do something. I had to say something about it. I mean, it was so clear when he came down that, escalator where we were headed, and what his core is about. It's like maintaining, a system where white folks are on top and that, black folks are thought of as inferior and embracing this idea of white supremacy. So that's where that came from. And the hashtag, which I started using in the later one, says Obama backlash. But it says America put white supremacy on the ballot. Guess what happened? And actually, I didn't draw that. I mean, I did draw it, but my friend and the curator of the exhibit, she was encouraging me to work more and get back to work. And I was like, she's like, you know what? I could digitally take out and you could use the same images that you drew before and do stuff. And I was like, you can do that? And then it was like, I had to find it, and then I still had to copy and paste it. I had to cut it out. I was like, I really copy and paste. I didn't do it I'm terrible with the computer, but that's what I had to do. And I was on my job. I was like, I can do this. And when I got home and I showed my son, he's like, "When'd you do that?" I was like, I had the job, but I had to, and that was what started me back into doing it again.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
We're all going to buy the book. Where else can they find your work, or what are you doing now?
So now I have no syndicate, obviously. My syndication ended in 2005. When you drop down to a certain number of papers, they can let you go. And I think I had a dozen at the time I was let go. But so now I do it for myself, and I put it up on Instagram. And I don't have deadlines. So whenever I'm feeling it, I do it, and more and more I feel it. So and my Instagram handle is not clever. It's just my name. So if you want to see it, just Barbara Brandon-Croft. That's how you can find it. And that's where I put it up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I changed the shape.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, it fits better in that for that media outlet or whatever it's called. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have, I think, about 20 minutes left because we need to make sure that we're out of here by 10:50 for the next crew. So I have, pages and pages of notes, but I want to make sure that you guys get a chance to ask questions. So for the next 20 minutes, why don't we open it up to the group?
Unless you have no questions. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I've got lots more, but.
Please repeat the question into the microphone.
Okay, all right, I'll repeat the question. Does anyone have a question? I'll go in the back, in the cap.
As you started getting more into the social commentary from the origins as more of a societal commentary, what was the reaction from the editors of the papers and the syndicates and stuff? Getting blowback from them? Was that accepted? Were you supported by them? How did that all work out?
I'm just going to repeat it, but I might. So the question was about as you got more into social commentary, was there pushback from the editors or syndicate? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Yes.
So I was with an incredible syndicate. I was when it was Universal Press Syndicate, and Lee Salem was editorial director. Miss him so. He was so encouraging. He was the best. He's the one that said to me, "You should probably do some more things on sexism and racism." I was like, "Really?" I was like, and so it was the exact opposite. They encouraged me to do what I was doing. And it felt like because I previously I had been talking mostly about, relationships, and, maybe girly things, not exclusively, but more of that kind of stuff. And he's like, you could talk about sexism, you can push it. And I was like, and it was like an awakening, and it was really helpful. And so I really felt supported at the syndicate. Yeah, thank you, Lee.
Yeah, great question. Yes.
Will we ever see a collection of your father's work?
Nice
Oh, and the question was about, will we see a collection of your father's work?
Nice question.
Yeah.
Because this has been my duty and my job to try to keep my dad's legacy alive. And he has so much stuff. I mean, decades before Luther, decades after Luther, he did so much. And a lot for the Black press, a lot for Freedom Ways before Luther, which got a lot of notice in the, the Black intellectual circles, all, like you'll see in the exhibit, Langston Hughes was a fan, and then after Luther, and during Luther, he did things for Black Resources, which was, and I always had trouble with this word, consortium, whatever it is, of Black newspapers. And so there's so much. So to answer your question, I hope so. I hope so. I actually, my vision for the still exhibit was a book. I was able to talk to my dad about that. He thought it was a great idea. He's like, let's do it. I was like, okay. I had no idea how to make that happen. But these people like Drawn and Quarterly contacted me to make this book. And I've been pushing the idea of making still into a so that's not just my dad's, that's, me too, sorry. But maybe I can also convince a publisher to do a collection of my dad's work.
Kickstarter.
Yes, Kickstarter, yeah. GoFundMe. Yeah, something, yeah. So I have to, figure that out now that I've been laid off from my job. I have time to start thinking about ways to do that. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think these archival collections of your work and your father's are so important, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously for the general public to get introduced to these, to say, hey, this is good, this is really great.
Yeah.
And also for, again, selfishly as a scholar, having access to clean copies of these materials. As I said, it was just, it's a challenge because I would be looking through newspaper and they have PDFs of the old newspapers, and I would try and scan and cut and paste your old strips, and the quality is not good.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging to go through each day because it would say like, it's on, the strip is on page D3, but I'd be going pages 1 through 70. So I'm like looking through, I don't know if any of you remember like microfilm and microfiche, like, and then you finally find it and it's just like completely blurry. So having these archival collections is just, I think it's such an important contribution to our culture.
Yeah, that we're hoping to get our collections to the Billy Ireland, my dad's and mine, for them for them to have it. Yeah. There's some boxes at the Library of Congress of dad's, and they have 2 boxes of mine, but I want all of it to be with the Billy Ireland. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my happy place because it has all the things.
It has everything right there.
Yeah, everything there.
And we'd be in such great company.
We had a question. Yes. Great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask first, what percentage of the strip they published made it into the Drawn and Quarterly book that's coming in February? I know,
And I don't know the exact. Oh, you're going to repeat what?
No, I'm going to repeat. The question was about what is the percentage of the strips that made it into the book, the forthcoming book from Drawn and Quarterly?
I would say, in my guess, 90-something%. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But we did put selected ones from the years. We write that's what it is because it's not every single one. Yeah.
I was just worried because as scholars and stuff like that, we were like, put it all in there.
Yeah. Some of it wasn't so good.
Well, that's true. 'Cause, I mean, sometimes I remember the big Alison Bechtel collection came out, and there were just a few missing, and immediately I was like, "What's missing? Why? What's happening there?" And then I have to track that down. I'm like, "Oh, what happened there?" So we're completists, I think.
But you don't want to put everything because I've been asked before, how do you know when a comic strip is done? And I was like, when it's due, that's when it's done. It's like, let's get it out. So if you look back, you're like, oh, that wasn't so great. So that's not in there.
Yeah. We had a question behind. Yeah. Yes. Yes, you, right? Yeah.
We already talked about this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could speak more on being like, I guess, having the good hair and fair skin, and whether or not you got pushback for doing an all Black women's comic and having darker skin characters, or just how did the community react to you? You feel like you got any feedback?
The question was about, it was about, did you have pushback from having the different,
From your community
about these different sort of representations and being fair skinned and the quote unquote good hair?
Yeah. You know what? I lived in Brooklyn when I was doing Where I'm Coming From. And that was the Northeast was the only place that I didn't have papers. I mean, I think the furthest north was the Baltimore Sun. And I think I got into the Boston. So there was a pocket of area. It's like, what's up with your sales team? You can't sell them. Anyway, but it wasn't there. So, I'm talking my immediate community. I know you mean it in a larger sense, but in my immediate community, they didn't know. My friends didn't even know what I was saying, So I didn't get that kind of feedback. But of course, you do get feedback from the larger. And if without euphemisms, we're talking about the Black community, right? How did they perceive what I was doing and saying? And of course, we're not monoliths. Somebody's going to be like, why do you got to talk about that? It's like airing dirty laundry or whatever. And I can remember getting a call. I did a radio call or something, and it was on a Black radio station. And I can remember somebody calling in a question saying, I know you're doing Black women, but I saw a picture of you and you had this straight hair. And I could clearly say, I was like, I don't know what picture you're talking about, but I've never put chemicals in, and this is before I started dyeing it. I don't dye it anymore, but this is before I started coloring it. But I was like, I've never put a chemical in my hair in my life. And the person on the radio was like, ooh. I mean, I was like, come on, this is my hair. If I use a curling iron, it's straight. If I don't, it's curly. It's like, this is my natural hair, and I'm representing natural Black people, of all looks. And so, I also, and then I go back to my immediate community, because I lived in a Black neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I can remember, and it was Fort Greene, so there was like all these people, it was like the Harlem Renaissance of whatever year that was. But, and, all these movers and shakers, and they're like, oh, Barbara's the cartoonist. And oh, what do you do? It's like, I do Where I'm Coming From. It's all Black women. And I got that from Black men. Like, oh, you're just dogging Black men. I'm like, no, I'm not. I actually often use names. I was like, I'm using a specific name. And that was one of the strips you showed.
Maurice.
Yeah, Maurice
really,
got a lot.
You got a lot.
You got to play.
You got a lot of attention, Maurice.
And I'm like, if you see yourself in Maurice, if I'm holding up a mirror and you see yourself, then you have a problem with me or you have a problem with the mirror. It's like you need to think about it. So was my hope to do, and that's what I think I did. And I didn't pay attention to blowback. It kind of invigorates you, like, oh, this pushed somebody's button. I'm doing my job.
You're doing your job,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm doing my job. Yeah.
Great. Yes.
Thank you. When I was at the exhibit yesterday, looking at your father's Luther strips, the thing that struck me is some of these were like 1968, early 70s, and they seemed very honest and frank for that time. And I grew up and I was reading comic strips at that time.
Yeah.
And what I was wondering is, how do you get away with it?
Well,
I'm sorry. The question was just about how Luther was able to, what the phrase was, get away with these really frank and honest discussions in the 60s.
Yeah. So, honestly, when the ones from the 60s were pre-Luther. So he was doing it for the Black press. But what he did for the Syndicate, because he started in Newsday, the paper in Long Island, in 1968 or 9, and he got syndicated with Los Angeles Times Syndicate. Those monkeys. No, they didn't want me, but sorry, they did my dad well. But what he would do with Luther was it was a more sly approach. You know, he would insert racism or social ills, so to speak, you know, within Luther without knocking you in the head. I mean, Luther, if people didn't know, was named after Martin Luther King Jr. You know, some of his characters, you know, had names like Hardcore. You know, that was a streetwise kid. And in a running theme with that is his mom had he had all these uncles, his mom's boyfriends. You know, it's like, but he didn't say that flat out. He called him uncle, you know, so-and-so, who was sometimes unemployed, who was sometimes incarcerated. You know, just the reality of growing up in a inner city, as he phrased it, you know, of a Black inner city. And what I like that I've said before is that what my dad showed was that how it was to be in these grow up in these communities and still have hope and still think you can get somewhere. And that was what Luther represented. So he did it in a slyer way through Luther, but he did it in a in-your-face way when he could talk, when he knew who his audience was, and what the editors there would be like, nice, you know, stick it to him, you know. But that was Dad. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Question right here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any advice for younger cartoonists financial.
Advice for younger cartoonists' financial future.
I'm sorry I laughed, but
It sounds reasonable.
I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I would not be so worried that I don't work as a research director at a magazine anymore. I mean, I guess the future is on the internet. You know, this is my guess because I'm too old to embrace that. I keep resisting trying to understand it. I don't know how to monetize it. You know, if they hadn't approached me about doing a book, I would still be trying to figure out how to get my stuff out there with my, you know, I don't know, 72 followers on Instagram. You know, I mean, so I really can't. I don't really have advice other than my only advice. It's not a way to make money, but other than to tell young cartoonists to just keep doing it, because the more you do it, the better you get. You know, the more you figure it out. And I say that to myself as well. You know, keep working. You're gonna, you know, you can improve. I just don't know how to make money. So sorry.
Maybe one last question. Another question. Yes, in the back.
I was wondering how you designed the hair.
The question is about designing the hair and the thought. So what? Okay, the hair on the characters. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, not this. No. But well, you know, I created them initially in 82. I got them published in 89. So a lot of their hair reflects what dues we were wearing at the time, you know. So I haven't changed that. I mean, there's a picture of me in her hat, you know, from back in the day. There's Lakeisha, you know, people ask about, that's just really just stylized dreads. You know, it was just interesting visually to me to have somebody look like that. I think I might have had Judy's haircut before, you know, cut to the side, and well, I have that now, and longer here, you know, but you know, pulled back, or, you know, high top, close sides. It's just a sign of the times, really. But I tried to use hair textures or what hairstyles were Black women were wearing back in the day. I didn't change that. I kept them the same. They're cartoon characters, for Christ's sake. I'm like, I'm gonna leave them the same.
Well, it's fun. I mean, it's. I think it's really fun reading through the strips, and you get to a sense of each of the characters' style and their
Yes.
personality, and they're all so unique. And it's amazing that you're able to do that with hair and facial expressions, and you know, they're so distinct. And I love that they have these conversations. And I'll change a page and I'm like, oh, it's Monica.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, you know, like,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
and
yes,
I
that's
feel
good.
like They're so distinct, and I love their conversation. Sometimes they'll be in a car too.
Yes,
They're
yes.
fun ones.
Yeah.
And also the way that you used, the lettering too in
Yes.
the conversations.
Yeah.
I think, and it's amazing the way that you use these tools to create these characters that I think are so important. I think. I love this strip. It challenged stereotypes. It established this presence in this community that's marked by diversity. And I think it really built a community, within this world, but also in the larger world. And so I'm just so grateful for you and this book that's coming out, and, for being so amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you.